Hello, everybody. My name's David Hugh-Jones. I'm an associate professor in economics at the University of East Anglia. One of the topics I specialize in is political economy, which is applying economic ideas to politics. Economists like to apply their ideas to everywhere in the social sciences, and politics is one obvious place to go. So that's something that I do, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Great. So this is about, well, what does it say? What do they ask me? A leader in difficult times. What was I gonna say about that? Let me think. Yeah, let's talk about sharks. So here's an episode from American history for you. This is from Aiken and Bartell's paper, which I'll tell you about in a bit. On the 4-day 4th of July weekend in 1916, the beaches of New Jersey were packed with crowds happy to escape the summer heat of nearby cities. On Saturday, July 1, a young Ivy League graduate from Philadelphia, Charles Van Sant, was swimming just beyond the breakers in 4 feet of water at Beach Haven. He was attacked by a shark. Skillful lifeguards managed to get him to shore, but he died soon after from blood loss. 5 days later, a young Swiss bellhop named Charles Bruder, a strong swimmer like Van Sant, ventured out past the lifelines at Spring Lake Beach, some 45 miles north of Beach Haven. Remember these names, Spring Lake and Beach Haven. He too was, wait for it, attacked by a shark. Though rescued by lifeguards in a small boat, he died of his wounds before reaching shore. In the days after the 2 deaths, nearly all of the diminished numbers of Jersey Shore swimmers stuck close to shore. However, no one worried about boys swimming in a creek on July the 12th in the town of Matawan, about 2 miles from open water. Yet one was attacked and killed by a shark, as was a young man from the Down who dove into the cover of the boy's body. Downstream, another group of boys were swimming at the same time in ignorance of the attacks. Guess what? Within half an hour, one of them had his leg mauled by a passing shark. He was quickly pulled from the water, reached the local hospital, and survived. I'm glad somebody did, right? Okay, so there's an interesting story about sharks a century ago. What's that got to do with politics? Check this out. That year, there was an American election. And Woodrow Wilson was up for re-election, and he got re-elected. But in a couple of places, his vote share dropped very substantially. And if you look up there, those places where his vote share really drops, Spring Lake and Beach Haven. He's losing 10% of vote share compared to the previous year. And if you look elsewhere in New Jersey, so that's the leftmost bit of the graph, you don't really see his vote share changing at all. So, Woodrow Wilson, the president's vote share, goes down by 10% or so in exactly the 2 places where there are shark attacks. So here's my first questions, and I want you to answer. So now you're going to have to chat. It's got to be interactive. Yeah. That's my question for you. Why? So why does a bunch of shark attacks in an area lead to the president losing a load of votes? Okay, so there's a couple of comments coming in. People were generally unhappy. They felt unsafe. If you feel bad, you vote for change. The president didn't do anything to prevent the attack. Maybe there is no link. Although, yeah, those all sound kind of reasonable, right? Kind of. I mean, that sounds like it's true. Matthew said maybe there's no link between both. That's a fair question, right? I just showed you a couple of graphs, a couple of data points. If you read the whole paper, you know, they do a bit more statistics than what I'm showing you. So I'm giving you the basic details. They make a reasonable case that places where they saw the shark attacks saw a bigger drop in Woodrow Wilson's vote than elsewhere. At the same time, right? Okay, you feel bad, you blame the government, but why would you blame the government for the shark, right? I mean, did they think Woodrow Wilson sent the shark? They feel the need to blame somebody, but have nobody but the government to blame. Right? That sort of sounds. They're looking for someone to blame. Yeah, right. I'm kind of agreeing with that. Here's an interesting one, right? Harris, hello Harris, hadn't done enough to protect against the possibility of attacks. That would be a good reason, right? I mean, looking for someone to blame doesn't seem like a good reason. But if that person had not done enough to stop shark attacks, well, okay, fine. In this context, a bit of historical detail is important. Basically, in 1916, people do not know how to stop sharks. You know, whatever modern apparatus there is, I don't know if we know now how to stop shark attacks, but back then, the president literally called up his advisors and said, you know, what can we do about this? And they were like, there's not a lot we can do, right? It's a fact of nature. Michael, perhaps people weren't sure themselves why they were unhappy. Yeah, right. Again, my intuition is that there could be something like that. Lucy comments, scarce resources. Wait, Lucy, tell me more. Ownership of common access. It could be. I mean, the sea is like a common access resource. But then, you know, again, you sort of, what's the president supposed to do here? So I'm not going to answer that question for you just yet, but I'll give you I'm going to give you some hints that might help us find an answer. Here's a picture, by the way, from like so you know, guess what? Like, these shark attacks go big, right? They cause panic. People start offering rewards for killing sharks. There's a newspaper headlines all over. You know, it starts off in the New York Times, page 18, and it sort of moves towards the front. One of these headlines reads, "East Coast begins war on ravenous man-eaters." You know, exciting stuff. And all of that panic, well, these are beach towns, right? They are tourist towns. So here's another quote. "The resorts were losing money rapidly, with $250,000 in reservations cancelled within a week. Turned out that, you know, come and see our shark-infested waters wasn't a popular hit with the tourists. Some resorts had 75% vacancy rates in the midst of their high season. Losses may have amounted to perhaps as much as $1 million for the season altogether, a sizable sum in 1918. Letters poured into congressional offices from the affected counties demanding federal action, though there was little any government agency could do." So people certainly wanted something done, and on the other hand, there's basically nothing the government could do. And the other thing is that there's an economic effect. It's not just that some people got killed by sharks. It's also like everyone in town is now losing money because the economy has been shut down because of this big natural disaster. Okay, I'm going to leave that little anecdote there for a moment. And then we're going to turn to do a bit of what economists love to do, theory. So, you know, if you do economics, you observe stuff, and the first thing that you love to do is you build a theory to explain it. You try and work out a theory that's going to explain what you just saw in as simple a way as possible. And as you probably know, like we don't just sort of build our theories in words. We like to use maths for our theories. Ideally, if you do it right, then what that ends up with is a very clear theory. It's like a maths problem. You know, you're either right or wrong. There's no sort of ambiguity. You've written it all down in this very precise language that we call mathematics. Of course, you know, that may not always work, but at its best, that's what we do. So here's a theory. And this is a theory about voting and elections. I'm going to break off. Kostikis said, is it because it's the economy stupid? Right, yeah, I mean, that sounds like it could be, okay? Having just said, like, if people are losing $1 million and they might get cross about that. And they might have reasons to think that the president can control or affect the economy, even if they can't, control or affect shark attacks. So then there's the question of, well, do they know it's, am I losing money because the president's been an idiot? Or am I losing money because of the shark? Quite a difficult question to answer. But as I said, I'm going to leave it there. We're going to come back. So here's a story about voting. Imagine that I'm a potential voter. Well, I am. Okay, good. I start off not knowing much about politics. Let's suppose that I'm basically ignorant. We all started off, we didn't know much about politics. And there's an election coming up. And I don't really know anything about the different candidates. Maybe it's my first election or whatever. I don't have a lot of experience. But I could find out, right? Because the parties publish manifestos. I could read those manifestos. I could learn their different policies. I could think about that. And if I get informed, I could work out, well, which of these people is better for me, and I would then vote for them. If I'm not informed, there's not really much point in me voting, because I'll be like voting at random. So, I won't know how that's going to affect the election regarding what I want until I find out who's going to have what policies. So I could read all the party manifestos. Here's how long they were in 2019. The Liberal Democrats came in at 28,000 words. The Labour manifesto was 26,000 words, plus some extra bits if you were really keen. Sort of like when if you're really into Lord of the Rings, you love to read the appendices. So maybe if you're really into Labour politics, you read the appendices. And the Conservative manifesto came into a relatively restrained 20,000 words. Right. Now, if you add that all up, it's the equivalent of a substantial Harry Potter novel. So you've got a choice, right? You could read these manifestos and get informed and cast your vote. Or you could read Harry Potter or do something else you liked. But, it's about equivalent to a whole Harry Potter novel. Now, I hope you don't think I'm cynical about this. But I'm going to guess that most people would rather read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets than 3 different party manifestos. Not everybody. Some people are really into their politics. Some are, but many people. So let's assume that there's a cost to me. If I spend the time reading Harry Potter versus reading the manifestos, I gain a cost which I'm going to call C. Look at it, it's maths. If you hate maths, I'm sorry. It's not going to be much of it. Okay? So compared to reading Harry Potter, reading the manifestos cost me C. C what? C dollars? C crisp packets? Doesn't matter. C. We don't care what the scale is going to be. That's not going to be relevant. On the other hand, the party's policies might affect me, right? They're going to have different tax rates. They're going to spend more on things I care about. Suppose I have children. I'm going to care about education. If I've got aged parents, I'm going to care about health. I'm going to have opinions about which of these parties is better for me. And if the party that I think is best gets into power, I'm going to expect a benefit of that compared to the runner-up. Let's call that benefit of B. Okay? B for the benefit, C for the cost. So now 2 more questions for you. Okay, first of all, use your intuition, use your judgment and your common sense. Is B bigger than C? Is B, the benefit of getting my favored party into power, bigger than C, the cost of reading 2 or 3 party political manifestos and learning what these parties are going to do? So that's question 1, right? Is B bigger than C? And then there's another question for you. Should I read the manifestos? What do you think? C is important. Yes, I should read manifestos. 1 vote might not necessarily have an impact. Okay. So I'm going to give you my sort of my intuition. B is bigger than C, but I might not live in a marginal constituency. Yeah, you guys are getting ahead of me. Oh well, I'm okay. Good. So I'll give you my answer to what I think about the first question is. Reading manifestos and voting might mean I'm bored for a couple of hours if I don't particularly love it in itself. Getting my favoured party into power, that could be quite a big deal, right? If you think about, let's say the tax rate differs by a couple of percent, for the average person, that might be a difference of £1,000 a year. Yeah, over 5 years, that's a lot of money, right? That's, if I said, I'll pay you £1,000 to read these boring manifestos, and afterwards I'm going to take a test, so you have to really do it. I bet you a lot of you would say yes. So my sort of that kind of back of the envelope calculation makes me think that the benefit of getting the right party into power, whatever that is for me, whether that's my self-interest or my altruism or whatever it is that makes me feel that way, it could be large, probably bigger than a bit of boring reading. Should I read the manifestos? Well, should I read it? So if B is bigger than C, I should read the manifestos, or should I? It's good to be informed, right? I mean, if you're not informed, you can't vote for the party you prefer. Okay, so that sounds plausible. Okay, and I already told you, right, that B is big. B can be a big deal. Like getting the party you want in power, that can make a lot of difference to someone's life. Let me give you another part. When we're missing a key term from the equation here, and actually some of you guys got this already. Let's work out the different things that can happen and the different actions I can take. I'm going to assume I can either read the manifestos and vote, or I can read Harry Potter. And there are basically three things that can happen. Okay. Maybe my preferred candidate, my preferred party, wins the election, right? By 10 votes, 100 votes, 1,000 votes, whatever, they win. Maybe my preferred candidate loses by 10, 100, or 1,000 votes. It could also be that there's an exact draw, not including my vote. Now, we can work out, right, just from what I've already told you, we can work out my payoff, my utility, in all of these situations, given my different actions. Let's do that. So if you start at the top left here, suppose I read the manifestos and vote, and my favorite candidate wins by 10 votes or 100. Okay, so then I get a good thing. My favorite candidate wins, but there's a bad thing. I have to read the boring manifestos. Okay, so I get B minus C, and we thought that B minus C would be positive. B is bigger than C. I get a big good thing, my favorite candidate, and I had to read some boring manifestos. What would have happened if I'd read Harry Potter? Well, on the assumption that the candidate was going to win without my vote, he was going to win anyway. So now, if I read Harry Potter, I get my favorite candidate, and I didn't have to read the manifestos. So I get B and no minus C. Now we can work out the next possible scenario. What if my favorite candidate was going to lose? Okay, well, if I read the manifestos, this is really bad for me. I don't get the candidate I want, and I had to read all that boring stuff. I could have read Harry Potter. I get nothing from the politics, and I lose this cost C. And if I didn't read the manifestos and hadn't voted, well, my candidate lost in any case. So I still get 0, but at least I could read Harry Potter. Lastly, there's this one case where there's an extract draw. So now, if I read the manifestos and vote, I'm the person that makes the decision tip My favorite candidate wins. I had to read some manifestos, but okay, I've got my favorite candidate, and it was my vote that did it. And if I stayed home and read Harry Potter, then I get 0. I don't get that benefit for my favorite candidate. So the middle line looks like that. I'm going to interrupt to answer a question. So yeah, Kostas says, is this like a payoff matrix? It's kind of like a payoff matrix, except normally if you think of if you know about this stuff, which you don't have to, if you think of game theory payoff matrices, you'd have sort of player 1's actions, player 2's actions. Here we just have like my actions and then the situation in the world. We're not assuming that that's because of lots of other people's actions. We're kind of taking those for granted. Now you could actually, of course, that what happens in the world depends on how everyone else votes. So actually you can think of this as a game with thousands of people involved. But doing it this way is really simple. Alcania says, isn't the chances for each scenario unequal? Yeah, right. Let's talk about that. So we can work out the probabilities of these. And we could literally sort of multiply each of these scenarios by the probability of each of them, and then multiply our utility. And if you know expected utility, then you'd be able to do that. But let's do something simpler, right? I always lose a cost C if I read the manifestos. But if there's an exact draw, I gain B by reading them because my party gets into power, and without reading them, they wouldn't have. So if my candidate was going to win anyway, then I get B anyway. If my candidate was going to lose anyway, then I don't get B anyway. So now I'm going to ask you a question. What are the chances of a draw? Right. Well, comment from Kostakis, very slim. Matthew, unlikely. Arcania, extremely slim. That would be my intuition. Actually, guess what? Nerds have studied this, right? And there are cases in the UK where an election is decided by a single vote, but they're rare. This is not something that happens a lot. You're talking about maybe 1 in several tens of thousands. And of course, if you think about something like the US election, which involves 300 million people in 50 different electoral colleges, never happened. Never happened. Of course not. So with that, we can work out the benefit of reading the manifestos and voting versus not reading the manifestos and staying home. Here it is. You should inform yourself, read the manifestos, go out and vote if PB minus C is greater than 0. P is the chance of getting an exact draw. B is the benefit from getting your party into power, and C is the cost of getting a bit bored. And the intuition here is P is very small. So unless the benefit is really like way, tens of thousands of times bigger than the cost of reading these dull manifestos, you're not going to do it. You're going to read Harry Potter. Okay. Nice theory. Is it actually true? Because according to that theory, right, that story says if you believe that most people don't intrinsically love reading party manifestos, then most people won't bother and they won't vote. But people do vote, right? So, welcome to the joy of economics. Sometimes our theories look pretty weird. So why do people vote? Okay, what's wrong? Our theory must be wrong in some way. So I'm going to leave you to think about that rather than getting you to answer it, right? But it's obviously an issue. I'm going to leave that to one side, but I'm going to answer another question. We're going to think about something else. Okay, people vote. That doesn't look very good for the theory. You could think about that. But there's another thing. Do they inform themselves? What I think the theory shows is that people have relatively little self-interested incentive to get informed. Now they've got little self-interest to vote, and yet we see a certain amount of that happening. So, you know, we should check before we believe the theory, right? I'm going to tell you what the sort of consensus is, but I'm going to do it via asking you a couple more questions. So here is a question where maybe if I'm lucky, I can create a vote for this. So my first question for you is, should the NHS budget be higher or lower? I'm going to see if I can make a vote. Hopefully you've now got a poll. What do you think? Should the NHS budget be higher? Yes if you want it higher, no if you want it lower. Tell me what you think. I guess there's a lot of rainbow signs on people's windows. All right. 10, 11, 4. Some undecided. 12, 4, 3 to 1. I feel that the people have spoken, right? You guys overwhelmingly believe that the NHS budget should be higher, and we are in the middle of a pandemic, so it might not be surprising that people, you know, that's a common idea right now. Okay, thank you very much. I'm not going to tell you what the right answer is because it's not that kind of question, right? But let me ask you another question now. What is the NHS budget? You can answer on chat. No cheating. No looking it up on Wikipedia. $130 billion. Any takers? 130 more, less? 80 billion? 120? 8% of GDP? A bit more than 130? Difficult question, right? I got 3 answers so far, and I'd love to tell you which of those is right, but here's the thing. I don't know what the NHS budget is. I'm sure I could look it up within, you know, 20 seconds because of the magic of the internet. But if you ask me, you know, I don't know. And I'm actually an associate professor, whatever the heck that means, of economics with, you know, my specialty is political economy, and I don't know what the NHS budget is. Why not? I mean, I have a rough idea. I'm pretty sure that you guys with 130 billion are not mega far off. You know, it's not 13 billion and it's not 1.3 trillion, put it that way. But I don't know it. And why would I, right? I've got an incentive to know about lots of things. If I'm writing a paper about the NHS, I'm going to look stupid if I get that budget wrong. I'm going to look it up. But I'm not. I don't write about the NHS. It's not my job. And because it's not my job, I don't have much incentive to know about it. That's not just me, and it's not just you. Apart from those guys, if you guys got the correct number, then congratulate yourselves. You know, well done. But I believe all the same that if I asked you a few other questions, you might well be like, oh, I'm not so sure about that. In general, there is a lot of evidence that voters basically know very little about policy and politics. If you want to read a book about that, there's one by Aiken and Bartels, the same guys who did the shark attack paper called Democracy for Realists, where they go into great detail. These guys are experts on voter knowledge. They're actually a couple of political scientists, you'll find a lot of work in there showing that voters basically don't know much. Now, on the face of it, right, that could be a problem, because if voters don't know anything, then how are they going to vote and make sensible decisions on how to vote for? So here's one possible answer people have come up with. Are voters completely ignorant? Maybe if we can't expect them all to be, sitting reading Wikipedia and reading the manifestos, you know stuff about the economy just from living in it. You get information for free. Just if you exist in the UK, you learn about the UK's politics because it affects you. If you're unemployed, you know the economy isn't doing well. Well, maybe the rest of the economy is doing fine, but at least one part of it is not doing well. If you have to use the NHS, then you have an experience with it. You discover whether it works well, whether it's efficient, whether the nurses treat you nice, and so on. Some events are going to be particularly what psychologists call salient. Like, let's say, picking an example completely at random. What if there was a pandemic? That would be a big salient event. You would pay a lot of attention to it. You'd probably even listen to the politicians because they're going to say stuff like, here's how to stay alive in the pandemic, and you would care about that. And when you look at that, by paying that attention, you're going to kind of get an impression of how well your politicians are performing. How is Boris Johnson doing during those daily briefings? Yeah, no. Most people don't spend their time waiting for Boris Johnson to come on the daily briefing, but when there's a plague, they might. Costa kiss, familiar face slogan and luck. Right, yeah, no, so those things might matter. I agree. Although, I mean, I don't know. Are those knowledge? Those things can help you get elected. But are they the same as helping people make an informed decision? That could be different. Here's a question for you all. Which politicians do you think have done well in the pandemic? And again, just give me your opinions. Maybe I can do another of these votesome things. All right, we've got a new poll coming up. Has this guy done well? I sense a consensus. No, well, strong feeling. Oh, but guys, his hairstyle. Okay, so I'm not sensing an overwhelming feeling that Donald Trump has done well. Okay, let me see if I can. I'm gonna update the poll. This person. I mean, I'm assuming that we all know this is Angela Merkel, German. Okay. Oh, 5 yes. 6, 7, 8. Yep, strong consensus there, right? Okay, let's try another one. Wait a second. Person number 3. I should add, when I say do well, I don't mean do well for themselves. I mean do well as in, stopping people dying. Pretty strong consensus for no. And I guess some people, yeah. There's a lot of no's. All right, so Vladimir Putin, probably, you guys don't think he's done very well. All right, last one. That is probably a bit less well known than the other 3. That's Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil. Strong no. Right. I mean, I guess he's the guy who's got famous for being like, it's all a big hoax. People die all the time. All right. Those are your opinions. First thing to notice is you guys all have, you guys have strong opinions about that, right? Of all those people I showed you, you kind of definitely knew what you thought. I don't know if you were right or wrong. I suppose that's going to end up being, who really did well or badly. Well, we're going to, be sitting there doing regressions for the next few years, really trying to disentangle all the complicated causality that goes on. But you guys have a strong impression, right? If you were able to vote on this basis, you certainly aren't uncertain. The other thing I would sort of comment is that on the whole, if you ranked those people in order of authoritarianness, you'd probably put Angela Merkel as kind of most democratic in a PR system in Germany. Donald Trump as well, he's democratically elected, but sometimes a bit kind of dodgy about the way he talks. Jair Bolsonaro, even more, seems to be liked by the army, and Putin wins elections all the time, but I don't think that makes him a Democrat. And so you might also think that that seems to follow the level of democracy, just in this very crude measure, seems to correlate with the level of performance during the disaster. So that sounds kind of good, right? In a way, it looks in disasters, politicians are right there in front of their electorate. What they're doing is very salient, and that gives them a strong incentive to perform, especially if they're going to face the electors. Vladimir Putin doesn't have that incentive. It doesn't matter what happens. He'll be elected next time round, short of something really radical happening. So that sounds good. That's what we'd like for democracy, right? Elections give leaders incentives to respond to disasters and to save people's lives. Good. But now let's think about the other side of that. Let's think about preparing for disasters. Let's have a comparison of disaster response versus disaster preparedness. I'd say that they compare like this. Disasters are dramatic, TV-friendly events. There on the left is George Bush heading into Hurricane Katrina in order to go and hug people and sort of try and take control of the situation, right? It's good television. They're very salient. Everybody cares about a disaster because it affects you directly. Everyone is going to be watching the TV. And the results of whatever you do are immediately visible. Either you do or do not screw up. Even with COVID, people are going to see. Disaster preparation is ongoing. It's happening all the time. You don't really see it. I haven't often seen news articles saying people are doing some disaster preparation because that wouldn't really be news. And the results are invisible until a disaster actually happens. You don't know if you were prepared or not. Kind of like with COVID, right? We didn't know how well our different health systems were prepared, and then it happens and you discover. But of course, that's 10 years down the road. All of those things suggest that disaster preparation might not be something that voters pay a lot of attention to. So here's my my last slide, more or less. This is a couple of scatter plots from a couple of work called Myopic Voters and Natural Disaster Policy. Don't worry too much about the details. What matters is that on the x-axis there, you've got how much they're spending. On the left graph, it's how much they spend on disaster relief. And the y-axis, going up, the y-axis is how much they get voted for, the change in incumbent vote share. And what you see if you do all those dots and sort of draw a line through the middle of them is a wiggly line that is going uphill. You spend more on disaster relief, you get more votes. You spend less and you lose votes quite drastically, maybe 10%. Now on the right, you have spending on disaster preparedness and your vote share. And the line there is kind of flat. In other words, you spend more on disaster preparedness, less, doesn't affect your vote. As you can imagine, this could be a problem. Okay, that's some of the kind of stuff that we do in political economy. That's something, if you ever came and took my course on political economy, you'd probably see some of these graphs again. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm going to hand back over to both of us. Helen and me are both going to have, Helena and me are both going to sort of have a Q&A. But first, I'm going to give you just one little coda. Remember the sharks. So those events from 1916 helped inspire a guy called Peter Benchley, who lived in New Jersey, to write a book much later. And the book became a well-known film. Final question for you. Which mayor said the real hero of Jaws is the mayor? A gigantic fish is eating all your constituents and he decides to keep the beaches open. Okay, in that instance, he was actually wrong. But in principle, we need more politicians like the mayor. We are often the only obstacle against all the nonsense, which is really a massive conspiracy against the taxpayer. Huh. I'll give it to Kostakis, who got there first. Boris Johnson in 2006. It's a great quote. So I thought, that was a sort of a, something that's come back to haunt him. Okay, that's the end of my my talk. We're going to have general Q&A. If you want to ask me questions about it, you can, or if you want to ask questions about UEA, economics, then we're ready to answer that. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you. So yes, if you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat now, and hopefully one of us will be able to answer them. So Lucy has said, which modules do you teach at UEA, David?
This year I taught 2 modules. One was political economy, kind of the stuff that you just saw. One was behavioral economics, which is a UEA specialty. We do the kind of economics where you look at all the sort of theoretical models like the one I just showed you and go, wait, does that actually work? And try and maybe build more models that are more like how real humans behave. That's something that UEA is kind of known for. I taught a part of it. Warning, that's what I did this year. Next year it could be different. Next year it could be different again. So, the teachers that you have, that changes from year to year as people get reallocated. So I wouldn't want to, tell you it's guaranteed. I've taught the political economy class for, I think it's 3 or 4 years now.
Brilliant. If anyone else has any questions, do pop them in. If not, I've just popped a slide up on the screen. So just to let you know, if you do want to hear more from UEA, receive some news, do sign up through that link. And then we also have a virtual open day on Saturday, the 4th of July, which would be really good if you could go to. Yeah, obviously do that. But otherwise, if there's no other questions, I'm just going to say thank you so much for that insightful talk, David. And I hope you all found it as interesting as I did. I'm an English literature graduate, so it's nothing to do with what I studied, but I found it really interesting. Hopefully you all did too.
All right, thanks, guys. Thank you for tolerating my lockdown beard. Have a good day.